Welcome to the Think Small podcast, hypergrowth for small businesses. So, what's slowing you down?
Welcome to the Think Small podcast. I'm your host, Denise Steinbring, and today's conversation is for anyone who has ever walked into a restaurant, looked up at the digital menu board, or just assumed it was always there. Or walked into a bank and used an ATM, or checked out at a retail store on a point of sale terminally. Anyway, somebody installed all of that, and when it breaks anywhere in the country, somebody has to show up and fix it. My guest today built the company that sends that somebody. Ron Rydeski is the founder of Voltage IT, which is a nationwide IT field deployment and technology services company that he started in Albuquerque, New Mexico in 2014. For 10 years, he's been building and managing a network of field technicians deployable anywhere in the country for installations, break fix, digital signage, point of sale systems, and retail technology. We make technology accessible. That's the Voltage IT promise. Ron, it's such a pleasure to have you here. Welcome to the Think Small podcast.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's an absolute pleasure to be able to be here.
But before we get into Voltage IT, I wanted to understand the career that built up to it, because you didn't start by founding the company, right? You've been in and around technology and entrepreneurship for a long time, going back farther than most people would probably expect. So take us back and give us the version that got you to 2014 and the founding of Voltage IT, if you will.
Sure. Well, I've always enjoyed technology and electronics and anything associated with that ever since I was young. So that's always been an interest. Moving forward, in about 82 or so, a friend and I, we started a software company. So back in those days, you were advertising in the backs of magazines, and we wrote some software, some games, and said, well, let's just try it. It was so long ago that whenever we went to the bank and said software, they thought it was a clothing line. So new terminology for then. We did that for a little while, just kind of something fun on the side, but it was a venture into business. Went to school in New Mexico State and then moved on, started working for Radio Shack back in the mid 80s. And one of the things that I figured out there is I liked the Radio Shack because I was in there looking at the fun stuff, and eventually said, well, why don't you work here? But I also then realized that I enjoyed the business side of it, the sales, the business, the putting it together, and moved to managing stores and thought, well, this is kind of fun. So it's not just the technology, but it was also the management side. Moved into where my brother had also managed a store, and we decided, well, why don't we just do our own, and started a dealership franchise store, Silver City, New Mexico, and just figuring it out. We think we did pretty good. We ended up being one of the largest in the Southwest dealership, and but at some point we kind of realized that it's still retail, it's still difficult. You still have to deal with electronics, and as we know, there's like thin margins on that kind of stuff. So we had the numbers, sold it back to Radio Shack, and so it became a company store at that point. Moved on to, in the 90s, moved on to finance and insurance and mortgage brokering. Did that on up until really wanted to kind of get back into the technology. So somewhere among there, kind of started working with technology, and then decided that learned a little bit about field service. So by the time we got to about 2014, we were able to start with field service and being able to dispatch technicians, starting kind of local first, figuring it out, and then realize just trying to expand that, and still trying to expand that with technicians wherever we can. And just like you were saying, it's if there's technology someplace, somebody has to install it, fix it, and there's a lot of companies, a lot of places, but somebody's got to put it in, set it up, make sure it works. And so that's what we do. Try to get people there, whether it's new installs or fix something, or just something needs to get set up. That's what we do.
So you kind of blew past that one comment. You said, we learned a little bit about field service. That was a bit of a pivot, right? So how did you go about learning about field service? Where did that experience come from? And what made you feel like you wanted to build a company around that?
Well, I didn't know it really existed. I mean, conceptually you kind of do, but somewhere along the way, whenever I was looking at what to do as I was moving out of the insurance and financials and just looking for other stuff, and just realized that, hey, there's people that do that. And then Along the way, got also connected. About the same time we started the company, it was kind of a side thing. It was connected with a larger company that actually did this and learned a lot through them. And one of the things is, what it actually takes to put something together because there's a lot of project management. You've got to make sure that the technician's there. You got to make sure product's there. You got to make sure that you get your clients. You've got to make sure they're trained and make sure they have all the stuff. So I learned a lot uh, behind the scenes with another larger company. And then at some point, just decided, well, I just kind of need to be doing this full time on my own now that I've got a bit of an education.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to that because MTI, which is who I think
Correct.
you're referring to, right? They're
Yes.
one of the
Yes.
largest IT field deployment companies in the country with, 318 million in revenue, a nationwide infrastructure, enterprise clients. So that's a great training ground for you.
Absolutely.
But, as you described, you've kind of been doing your own thing for most of your careers. So what did seeing it at that scale teach you that you couldn't have learned any other way? And what made you feel like 2014 was the right time to say, I can do this better. I'm going to go out on my own.
What I kind of learned is you have to be prepared. Um, you have to plan, you have to be prepared. Because it was kind of running concurrently with what I was doing on the side. And so I had kind of started doing some of the voltage stuff and then went working for MTI, kind of put the voltage on pause. So what I learned is just you got to plan things. And one of the things that I really learned there, of course, met some great people, is that they did a good job of making sure that the technician was prepared. We spent a lot of time. I worked in the training department. Worked in dispatching and managing technicians in a lot of areas as a manager. And it's just a lot in making sure that technician is prepared, making sure that when they go on site, they know exactly what's happening, that they know, we did training videos, we did documents, that kind of stuff. And you also plan for contingencies. How's the product going to get there? How are they going to pick it up? Is it going to be on site? So it got me involved in really starting to understand that what project management was and making sure that all these little pieces that you don't necessarily think about initially that you got them covered. And so I really enjoyed my time there and enjoyed the people that I worked with. But at some point it was like, now that I've learned a little bit, let's just go back to where I was and let's just try to do the same thing on a smaller scale, building up to a larger scale.
And is there something unique that, a leaner founder run version of that model could do that the giant couldn't?
In some respects, yes, because we seem to be able to respond quicker. That's one of the things that when you're in a larger company, while I think they did a good job at everything. I think one of the things that I've tried to do is we can be able to respond quicker, be able to have a little better relationship with the client, more direct relationship with the client and say, okay, what exactly do you need to get done? So maybe a little more hand holding and a little more attention to detail at times,
And I,
which
and
is
I think,
fun.
yeah, and I think you told me that when clients call Voltage IT, they get you, right? Not a ticketing system or a regional manager, three layers of
Well,
you.
it
So,
it depends. I mean, there's more than just me, but yes, often it's me. But we do have other people in the office that if they're calling and say we need to schedule this, it can be me, but it could be others as well. But whenever there's an issue or something detailed that we need to take care of, a lot of times I'm right in the middle of it, making sure everything works.
so it's more of that white glove concierge type of service, right? Because it
Exactly.
sounds like you really deeply know your clients.
Exactly. Yeah. Try to anyway.
Yeah. So on the flip side of that, you've been doing this for 10 years now. What's the hardest thing about competing against the giants in this space, and where do you win that competition most often doesn't win?
I think where challenges are is, I guess, like a lot of business, you're always looking for business. What's the best way? Who do you talk to? How do you propose? How do you make sure that you can tackle a project that you need to? I think one of the things that has helped is that I think because we do a lot that is, like you say, I guess some of that white glove. Don't necessarily think of it that way, but in some sense that is true because we try to be hands-on, make sure they're trained. So as a result, I think we do a pretty good job, and I think our clients do because we get clients that we're working with saying, okay, we've got your techs. We want to send this to you. We want to send this to your team. But so do you have somebody in Nebraska? Do you have somebody in this area? Do you have somebody in this area? And sometimes it's, yeah, we got some people in that area. Let's get you connected. Let's get those jobs done. Or sometimes it might be in an area that they say we really want to send it to you guys, but maybe we don't have somebody in that area. And then we'll work with them and say, okay, what exactly do we need to do? How many technicians? What kind of projects? What kind of ongoing project? And then we'll go to our teams and work through our processes. We have some things that we've kind of developed to bring in technicians, and we'll say, okay, we've got a big project over here. It looks like they want ongoing stuff. They don't have anybody else they trust for this area. Let's work with them. So in that respect, we're working directly with them. They're talking to us saying, hey, we need technicians in there. We want to send it to you. You've been doing a good job in this area, in this area, in this area. We like your teams. Can we expand that to other areas? So I think that's kind of where we shine.
Okay, well, that's a nice segue because I wanted to talk a little bit more about the technician network. So, your business runs on one thing, right? When a client somewhere in the country needs a technician, you show up reliably, on time, with the right skills. And that means you're managing this nationwide network of field technicians, people who are mostly independent, might be working for multiple companies in cities you may never have been to yourself. So, how do you actually build that network, maintain the quality standard that you hold for Voltage IT, and make sure that the person walking into a client's location on your behalf is representing you the way you'd represent yourself?
Great question. I think that's kind of some of the questions we try to ask ourselves, right? How do we do this? And a lot of it has been a learning process. A lot of things that I had learned from MTI and just experience in doing this. And one of it, I think, really gets back into having systems in place. Is that one? Well, I want to back up just a second. One is recognition that you're never perfect. You can't strive. You can people say to strive to perfection. Well, you're striving to something that is unobtainable. So the best that you can do is the best you can absolutely do, and do it with honesty and integrity, and do that. It's that we have processes in place when we bring a technician on. We want to understand what their skill set is. Where do they need to expand their skill set? What tools and materials do they have available and access to, or what do we need to get them? All in the process of, before we ever send anybody out, is, are they prepared? We also try to work with, like I said, they're independent. They might be working other things. They might be students. There's just a full gamut of what they're doing. Some are doing this full time, maybe for us and for other people. So one is just being prepared and knowing when they can work, and then also working with the companies that send us business, or the clients, and trying to have a good understanding of what the job actually is. To give you some examples, is that was the part I think I learned as far as the project planning, because a lot of times we'll get something and say, well, this needs to get done. And then it's like, okay, well, that needs to get done. Are parts on site? Are they not on site? Who do they contact when they're on site? Who do they, just going through that planning. And I think it all wraps up into just the preparation, setting the preparation with a technician, and then setting the expectations and the preparation with the client to say, are we ready to go? Do we have everything? Because I don't want to send a technician on site and say, oh, we forgot about this contingency or this possibility or something, and they end up not having what they need, or something didn't get shipped or something like that. So it's just really the preparation.
Yeah, and I think you had shared with me some other, to be a little bit more specific on the planning, right? You've got tools that do skills assessment and matching, right? And you've got closeout
Correct.
documentation systems that minimize gaps in payment down the road. So these are all
Right.
things that you've put in place to really give the customer a great experience, and to ensure that your technicians are prepared. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, it's all and it's usually what happens is, like most businesses, if something goes wrong, then you think, okay, well, why did it go wrong? And was it a big wrong? Was it a little wrong? How do we fix it so that doesn't happen again? And then you just own up to it. It's like, okay, we didn't think about this, or this wasn't planned, or this wasn't prepared. And then you say, okay, now we need to make sure our system now encompasses this, so that going forward, that, like you say, the documents are in place. The technician has the documents they need. They know what tools they need. They know what skill set they need. We've talked to the client. We've set expectations and says this, they say, well, I think this can be done in 2 hours. And it's like, no, this is a 4 hour job. And here's why. And just setting expectations all the way around so that whenever it becomes time to do the project, whether it's a big project with visits all over the country or whether it's just an individual fixing something at a local store, right? You want to make sure that everybody's prepared and that you built all the systems so that it's just smooth.
Where do you source some of your talent? Are these college students? Are there pools of technicians in different cities? Like, how do you go about sourcing your technicians when you need them?
A lot of phone calls, referrals. And that's one thing that we do is we get referrals from existing technicians, which is helpful. So we've kind of built that into our system. We use various online sources, that people are familiar with, that we see if they're interested and create interviews. We'll make calls to various places. We've worked with universities. We've worked with churches because there's a lot of times youth pastors and uh, pastors and stuff that a youth pastor sometimes is great because sometimes they're young, they enjoy working with technology, they're doing all that kind of stuff, but it's not something they do full time. So they're always looking for things on the side, and they're good at it. So it's a little bit of a referral network, internet sources from our website, and then sometimes even our clients sometimes will say, here's somebody that maybe you need to talk to, and then we bring them through the process and say, okay, is this somebody that wants to plug into our network, and is this somebody that we want to plug into our network? Because we kind of have high standards, but we also know that we have a system. And one of the things that I do want to point out is kind of on this thing is that one thing that I've found is that I have a passion for bringing somebody through the process of learning. So here's some examples that have happened is like we'll get a college student that is learning about technology or computer science and maybe hasn't done some of this stuff. Well, we've got a system where we can take that knowledge base and we can train, we can get them up to speed. And then, of course, we got support. Sometimes it's maybe somebody they can work with in the area that they're at. Sometimes it might be just remote support working with them. But we've had a lot of success where they've learned a new skill set or a batch of new skill sets that they didn't have. And it just makes you feel good because then they might move on and went into another full-time job that's great. And yes, we lose a technician, but we also feel an incredible sense of accomplishment to be able to say we brought somebody that learned a brand new skill set. They were able to apply that skill set and move on to something that they thoroughly enjoy doing to the next level. And it's just like that's kind of the core of business, core of America is just bringing somebody through to a better place.
Yeah, I
And,
love
and
that.
it's and it's really something we feel strongly about.
Yeah, and you're definitely paying it forward, right, to the next generation to launch them into a successful career that might not be with Voltage IT, right?
Yeah, and I'm totally okay with that. We're not trying to hang on to somebody that needs to move on. It's like one thing that I've learned that I did not have at the beginning, but I have now is just the passion to be able to say, "Hey, let's teach you something. Let's do something. Let's make, let you make some money along the way. And if you keep doing this, great. If you move on to other areas, wonderful, wonderful. But you've learned something new."
And that's so important because you hear even from a lot of college graduates, right? They have such a hard time getting that first job because the employers want experience and they're like, "Well, how do I get the experience if no one gives me a chance?" Right? So it's a great
Right.
way to live your values, but it also creates a problem in terms of building a sustainable operation, given that you have a workforce that's always in motion. How do you handle that?
You're constantly bringing in new people. Um, that's just part of what it is, and that's okay because people are going to be moving on, and I think there's part of that recognition of that is you want to have your systems, and so we try to have our systems that we can bring new people on, um, ongoing. Whether it's a new area, a new project. We'll get some big projects in some areas where they'll say, well, we need a bunch of technicians for a project. And so it's just always just constantly as part of what we do, talking to new people, whether it's like I was saying through referral networks, calling things, or, online sources that exist to generate traffic that you could talk about,
Yeah.
that you can talk to a technician.
Well, that's great. I want to talk about something that every founder in a services business eventually runs into, and that most of them don't see coming until they're in the middle of it. So you've got clients, sometimes big companies who pay on net 30, sometimes net 60, and you've got technicians who need to be paid for the work that they did this week, not 30 days from now. That
Right.
gap can sometimes create a real business problem, and you have found creative ways to manage it, including invoice factoring. Can you walk us through what that experience taught you about the difference between revenue and cash? Because those are two completely different things, right? And most founders
Right.
don't realize that until it's already a crisis.
Right. And that's one of the things that we had to learn. And of course, I didn't have to deal with that with when I was working with a big company, right? Because I wasn't on that side. I was just on dealing with the technician side. So yeah, you learn that. And what we had to do is we had to realize that you got two ways to be able to do that. One is you create an internal buffer yourself, which sometimes is hard when you're growing, right? And then it also creates a kind of a bottleneck at times if you're not planning for it and thinking about it in advance. Is that so when you get a new client, you get a whole bunch of business, and then you realize that, oh, wait a second, I'm not going to get paid for that for 15 or 30 days, and the technicians need to be paid right now. So now you are out more money to make more money on a bigger project. So some of the things that we've done is, one is worked with our clients and seeing if we can cut that gap down, and when we can, and sometimes that works. Sometimes they're waiting through the process. And then you had mentioned invoice factoring, and the simple version of that is that there are companies and individuals that will, the simple version is in essence buy your invoice, knowing that they're going to get paid in 30 days, charge you a fee so that you can get paid this week. So we try to develop the systems, and we still need more people to help with that, but we just try to work with that. There's also a fee involved in that, so it's always the trade-off of, well, you're gonna pay the fee because then you can get a technician or get a bill or something paid right away on an invoice that might not be due for 30 days. And then when the invoice pays, they pay that, it gets paid to them. That seems to work for us. And we're also working on trying to build up some internal so that we basically are doing that for ourselves as well. But you always have to have that available, especially whenever you're trying to grow, is some kind of funding, whether it's an internal or other kind of funding. And we're looking for ideas as well. What's the best way? But yeah, sometimes you need cash quicker than you're going to get paid for it, even when you're growing.
Right. And is there a version of this business, like a pricing structure or, I don't know, a client qualification approach or a payment terms standard that would make the cash flow problem go away? Or is that just the reality of this industry?
That seems to be the general reality, is that a lot of times there are different things, and sometimes you're getting paid, as soon as the job is completed. But usually what happens is you might have a project that is, I think a lot of it is just a lot of the timing. So you might have a project, say it's 50 locations, we'll just keep some areas. Okay, so there's upgrades at 50 locations. So you've got 50 visits, or maybe it could be 100 visits, because there might be a first visit, there might be a second visit to upgrade something at least 50 locations. So when you're working with a client, you're doing the process, you're getting them all the documentation, all the pictures, all the sign-offs, all the forms, all the approvals. Yes, this is complete. Then they push it into their system and it cycles out. And then probably the end client that's paying them, because you might have, if you're upgrading something, you might have the location, you might have the people that are actually doing the software. There could be like a lot of different people involved. And so it's understanding that. And then they're going to say, well, then that's going to cycle out. Okay, well, that's completed, that's done. We have it in our system. It's going to cycle out, and then it comes back. And then sometimes it takes a while. And we've tried to work with them, and sometimes it does to soften the blow.
Yeah.
But there's sometimes just so many variables that it's just kind of the nature of what it is. So you got to plan for it.
Yeah. So then what's next for Voltage IT in the next 3 to 5 years? Are you going to try to expand more nationally? Are you going to target higher profitable types of customers? You tell me what's next for growth for you.
Yeah, yes to the above. Obviously, want to keep expanding. We're always looking for more clients, more areas that we can be working in. Working with some sales projects that we're starting to put together where we can build the content for the media. For example, there's third parties that put the content on displays, but let's say you're a healthcare provider or someplace, well, there might be screens in your office. Well, there's a third party that puts the media together and sells the advertising and et cetera. So we're looking at some options to be able to uh, see if that makes sense for us to move into those areas where we are not only the technicians that are putting the devices in, but we are also the company that does some of the back end that would normally send us out. So that involves sales and salespeople and contacts and developing new systems and trying to generate some ongoing revenue streams that way as well. And we'll see how that goes. But so we got some things that are looking promising, and I think it's time where we're able to branch out into some of those areas.
Well, Ron, last question. You've been building things since you were in high school, right? Software out of magazine ads, a Radio
Right.
Shack franchise, financial services companies, and now 10 years of Voltage IT with a national team. So some people might have stopped and taken a job somewhere comfortable along the way. But for a founder who's in the middle of building something right now, maybe it's year two or year five, or maybe the cash is tight and the pipeline isn't filling as fast as they had hoped. What's the one thing that you would tell them? Or maybe you've got more than one thing.
I put down some points and then I'll kind of expand on that to kind of answer that. One is I think you kind of have to evaluate if this is for you, and at some point you're going to have to make the decision. Okay, am I all in or am I all out? Right. And so some points that came to mind whenever we were talking to this, and kind of a path on some of the things that we had done is one, you kind of have to do whatever it takes. And I think of kind of an incident that, for example, we've got a technician that needed, well, we had an urgent call, and this is kind of a constant thing, but so this is kind of a generic thing, but had an urgent call where you had to be someplace, you just needed to get somebody there to take care of something. Had a tech that needed to have something a couple hours later, but he said, "Yeah, I could go over and look at that. Let's see if we can get that taken care of." So you do whatever it takes. You try to take care of what it is, and this applies in a lot of areas. The other thing then is sometimes things take longer than expected, so you got to be aware of that. So in this particular case, what he was hoping to get done quickly turned into a little bit longer, and so you just have to be aware that things are going to take longer than expected sometimes. And then I say you work with what you have. So in this case, it's like, okay, well, we got a place that we need to be. This technician's taking longer on this just to get this done. So you call another technician and say, can you cover this? And said, yeah, okay, yeah, I can get that covered. And then I find out, well, then the unexpected happens. So he goes out and the car doesn't start. There's not, something's wrong. So he's trying to cover something. Well, he can't get there in time. And so the other point that I had is, well, then you got to keep people in the loop. And so you call and say, okay, this is what's happening. This is what's going on. This is when we think we can be there. I'll be right back to you. Let's get this figured out. And then you kind of regroup, replan, reschedule. So once he got his car going, we got him over there. We're a little late than we were expected. We still got the job done. But I think all of that just summarizes it, like we were saying, you do whatever it takes. Sometimes it takes longer than expected. You work with what you have. The unexpected can always happen. Always keep people in the loop and always be okay with regroup, replan, reschedule, and just keep moving forward.
Yeah, that's such great advice. And I think the key for me that you hit there was communicate with the clients, right? Everybody's
Oh,
had
yes, yes.
the cable guy that was supposed to show up between 8 and 3, so some broad range, right? Then they don't show up. You don't know why. You've taken the day off of work. So, I mean, if you could just solve that problem, I think you'd be far ahead of everybody else.
Yeah, and you'd be surprised how often that clients aren't communicated with. It's like,
Yes.
you got to just let them know. Well, and not only the client, but your whoever's in charge of the project, and all the people in the loop.
Mm-hmm.
You got to talk to it, and then if something's right, that's great. If something's wrong, let's talk it through. Let's get it fixed. But you got to keep everybody in the loop, and be okay with that, and do it promptly.
Yeah. What's that old saying? When something goes wrong is the best time to delight your customers, right? Because it's all in
Right.
how you respond.
Right. And I think that's where, as I said earlier, people like what we do, because I think that's one thing that we do well, is that if something's right, that's great, and we make sure they get all the materials and everything that they need to close it out. If something goes sideways, we're prompt, we're communicative. Let's figure it out. And it's not always sideways because of us or a technician, but you get out there and something that's supposed to be working, a piece of equipment goes sideways, or something that, there's a dead piece of equipment, or there's anything. It's not necessarily just that because of the technician, it's just the whole project. There's things can happen. So you got to communicate quickly, effectively, and say, okay, what's the next plan? How are we doing this?
Exactly.
I tell the technicians the fun thing about this, it's the same every day, but it's always different,
Mhm.
meaning that you are doing the same type of stuff, but you're always learning, and it's always different, because every work order, every job you go on, you're probably going to learn something.
Exactly. And making sure that your customers feel listened to, right? It sounds like you're
Right.
very, very focused on giving that client a great experience. So well done.
Yeah. Thank
Ron,
you.
this has been
Thank
a
you.
genuinely fun conversation. For our listeners who might want to learn more about Voltage IT or get in touch with you, where should they go?
Well, you can go to our website, voltageit.com. If you have any requests or want to talk with anything, probably the best is you can always send an email to scheduling@voltageit.com,
Hmm.
because it's either myself or somebody else's looking at that. And whether you need to get something done, or whether you're a technician out there that says, I want to learn more, go to those two places, voltageit.com. There's a form there, or just send an email, which is probably even quicker, because somebody's going to see it like right away, scheduling@voltageit.com, and we'll follow up with you.
Awesome. And to our Think Small listeners, if today's conversation reminded you that revenue and cash are two completely different problems, or that building a distributed workforce is one of the hardest and most instructive things a founder can do, share this podcast with somebody who's in the middle of figuring that out right now. We'll see you all next time, and thank you so much, Ron, for sharing your time with us today. It's been a pleasure.
It has. Thank you, Denise. I appreciate it.
Welcome to the Think Small podcast, hypergrowth for small businesses. So, what's slowing you down?